Over the last 20 years, the world of advertising has changed dramatically. Online advertising has led to the growth of some of the most profitable and powerful companies in human history. Around 80% of Alphabet or Google's revenue comes from advertising, and Facebook or Meta, it's 97%. Online advertising has also been great for small businesses. It's easier than ever to reach your target audience. If you were selling a product and you wanted to reach women that are single, that do Zumba, that also vote Democrat, you could reach them, and you could sell the hell out of some insulated water bottles. As a consumer, it's good for us because I should only be seeing ads that are relevant to me, that are based on my search history, that are based on my interests from Facebook, the groups I follow. Plus, if I don't want to see the ads, I can just not use the services, or a lot of services allow you to pay to remove the ads, like Twitter does this. I pay for YouTube Premium so I don't have to see the ads. And then there's billboards. Billboards do none of these things. Zero targeting, 90% of billboards I see are not relevant to me. Zero tracking, these businesses have no idea if their billboard is having the desired effect. Zero interaction with the customer, zero opt-in from the customer. So do billboards still provide a net value to society? Are they a completely valid form of free speech and use of private property, or are they simply a relic of a bygone era? Could we be headed towards a future with no billboards? I've spent the last several weeks diving into the rabbit hole that is billboards. It goes deeper than I ever could have imagined. This is a story of government control versus individual freedom, lawmakers caving to lobbyists, and the very meaning of democracy. It's worth understanding what's happening because we eventually are going to inherit this mess from the older generation, and I think we, the internet generation, the young people, can have a much bigger impact than we realize. This all started the other day when I was driving to work. I'm minding my own business, eating my oatmeal. I'm driving my usual route, and I see something so strange, something that really got me thinking, something that sent me into this weird rabbit hole I never thought I would find myself in. What I saw was a billboard to this effect. It said, ads you can skip, and then the can was crossed out, and it said can't with an asterisk. So weird. First of all, it's like they're trying to rub it in our faces that we have to look at their billboards. And second, I realized that I've been seeing so many of these recently. Billboards for billboard companies, which tells me maybe no one is buying these things anymore. I mean, it seems like such an old-fashioned way of advertising. When I'm browsing the internet, I always use an ad blocker. I pay for YouTube Premium so I don't have to watch the ads. I mute the TV when the commercials come on. But then I realize as I'm driving to work, it's like I'm getting spammed with ads. It's like we're driving through one of those terrible recipe sites where you're just getting spammed with ads all the time. Video popping up. It's got that X that's really hidden in the corner that you can't really see. That's what it feels like driving down the freeway. So I wanted to find out what would it take to get rid of billboards entirely. An IRL ad blocker. But wait a second. I'm a freedom-loving American. I want smaller government. I'm a strong believer in capitalism and individual freedom. If you have some private land next to a freeway, you should be able to do what you want with it, right? Even if that means putting up a huge sign. As long as it's not on a scenic road, you know, where it would be blocking a beautiful view. So you can't see what's behind. Okay, come on, this is crazy. So we actually already have regulation around this stuff that I think most of us are very happy about. It's called zoning laws. I don't think anyone would be okay with their neighbor putting up some massive billboard in their front yard. That's what the zoning laws are for. So this is not really a right versus left issue. Alaska, for example, is extremely conservative. In fact, no state has voted for a Democratic presidential candidate fewer times than Alaska. They're all about small government. They all move so far away so they'll be left alone. And yet, people in Alaska passed an initiative in 1998 with an overwhelming 74% of the vote to ban all billboards. Other states have done the same thing. Vermont was the first state to put in place a total billboard ban in 1968. Maine followed suit in 1978. And of course, Hawaii. They've been unfriendly to billboards since the 1920s. So an IRL ad blocker is possible. But first I wanted to know, are businesses still using them? Are they effective? Bill Ackman, a billionaire hedge fund manager who spends his days studying markets and trends, recently said this about outdoor versus online advertising.
The world is moving from offline advertising to online advertising, and that trend, I think, continues. Why? Because you can actually see whether your ads work. You know, they used to say about advertising, you know, you spend a fortune and you just don't know which 50% of it works, but you just sort of spend the money because you know ultimately that's going to bring in the customer. And now with online advertising, you can see with granularity which dollars I'm spending. You know, when people click on the search term and end up buying something and I pay, you know, it's a very high return on investment for the advertiser.
So is the billboard industry the next Blockbuster Video or Kodak cameras? Will they eventually die a deserved death to online advertising? These are the top outdoor advertising companies and their stock prices over the last 5 years. I'm not exactly a financial analyst, but this does not seem good. So maybe billboard companies will fade away all on their own. Just let the free market work its magic. It's possible, but as I dug into it more, I realized there is another powerful force at play: lawmakers. The main organization opposing billboards is called Scenic America, and there are several branches spread throughout the country. I spoke with the people behind Scenic Utah, Kate Kapishke and Dr. Sylvia McMillan, to find out what's being done currently to oppose billboards and if they think it's possible to have an all-out billboard ban, an IRL ad blocker.
Polling has shown for many years that people don't like this stuff. We did a poll in 2019. It was a midterm elections thing, and we actually know somebody who works for a polling agency, and he asked us if we wanted to put some questions on a poll that was about something else. It was a like survey of likely voters and who they were going to vote for. They came back to us later and said, "Wow, we've never seen such strong numbers where there's so much agreement of different demographic groups, that people hate these things." And one of them was, would you support an all-out ban on billboards? And of likely voters in Utah that year in midterm elections, 80% said they'd want to see a ban on billboards. And that was Republicans, Democrats, rural.
Right.
There was another one that was something like, you had to agree with, billboards are a good source of income and they don't really bug me. Billboards, I don't really care one way or the other, or billboards are terrible. It was like 75% of people said they're terrible.
Oh my
and
gosh.
so it was robust. And then we did another one recently that was similar, and that was just Republican, that was just GOP. And it was similar results. Question as to why don't lawmakers respond to that? At the state level, our best guess is it's just about the money. They'll just send legislators checks every time they run, even if people don't ask for it. But they're hugely influential up there.
This is what's so interesting to me about this issue. If the public opinion polls are showing that 80% of people would support a total billboard ban, no one you talk to actually likes billboards. How do we still have them? My dad was in the state legislature a long time ago, so I asked him if he was ever approached by the billboard companies, and it turns out he was, and he actually took money from them.
Yeah, billboard companies have influence with legislators. You're going to say, well, how do they do that?
Yeah.
It happens in a lot of ways. The very first thing that'll happen is when you win election, you discover that everybody wants to give you money, and you generally take it. I took it. A lot of people took it because it costs a lot of money to run a campaign. I mean, even a small little state legislature campaign, you got to buy signs, you got to run a website, you got to host events, there's a lot of expense that goes into it. And some people might be able to self-fund that, just pull it all out of their own pocket. But most cannot. I mean, these are supposed to be citizen legislators who are supposed to be representing their friends and neighbors and really everybody in the state. And so, yeah, most legislators will accept contributions from industry groups. And the billboard industry was very active at that. It wasn't huge. I mean, we're talking 20 plus years ago for me, but I remember getting contributions periodically from the billboard group of maybe $100 to $150 or maybe as much as $250. But all those contributions are all public record. They're all publicly disclosed.
Okay.
And so anybody could go on the state website and see that I took $150 or $250 from the billboard people, and I took $250 from the Realtors Association, and the Taxpayers Association gave me $500. They can look and they can see that.
Yeah.
Now, if they look on there and they see the Billboard Association gave Farron $5,000, and he just happens to be the chairman of the committee who's reviewing the bill that they support or that they oppose, then maybe there are valid questions that can be asked. But for the most part, in my experience, the contributions I saw from the billboard industry were pretty small amounts in line with what everybody else was doing, and certainly not enough to influence my judgment or my vote on anything. And for that matter, I don't think it was enough to influence anybody's vote. And people would say, well, of course it influences your vote, or they wouldn't be giving you the money.
So I'm looking at the disclosure website for the state of Utah, and I found Reagan Outdoor Advertising, which seems to be the biggest donor to Utah politicians. This is the transaction amount. So the most that they paid was $50,000 to Friends of Spencer Cox. So $50,000 to the governor makes sense. and then $12,000 to Battleground Utah PAC, and then another $7,500 for Friends of Spencer Cox for the Governor's Golf Tournament. Interesting. But it seems like the typical amount that they're donating is, you know, $700 to each of these individual candidates. So my first thought is that's not that much money, you know, even 50 grand for Spencer Cox. But you can't underestimate the power of a gift, the power of free. In the book, The 48 Laws of Power, one of the rules is despise the free lunch. It says, what is offered for free is dangerous. It usually involves either a trick or hidden obligation.
It's more than just those donations. There's donations to the party. There's donations for the inaugural. There's donations so people can fly to the CPAC convention or whatever. In 2015, when my husband was running for a third term for mayor, and industry went all out to stop him from trying to get in, and they put a billboard up in Salt Lake City for every other candidate, for like 5 candidates that were running against him. And that year, they also started a PAC. And so with those, with Citizens United and all that, they don't have to disclose how much they give. So they can now give to candidates through a PAC and not disclose the amount.
But the other thing that has just been occurring to me as I watched this last legislative session is that leadership has a lot of authority. And it's go along to get along kind of thing. If the word comes down from Cox to the Republican-run legislature, I want this billboard thing to happen like this, they're going to do it. It's not worth it to them to fight the fight for something that is just way down the list for them. And billboards is way down the list for a lot of people. My concern with that, though, is that we're increasingly living in an ugly environment. You know, the Highway Beautification Act was passed in 1965. Clear back then, Lady Bird Johnson was driving down the freeway and said, these billboards are ugly. They're blocking the beautiful, scenic America. And they made an effort to stop it back then.
Initially, as I was looking into this issue, you see an organization like Scenic America or Scenic Utah, and it seems nice, you know, it's like, oh, they're trying to preserve the beauty. But there are more important matters to be concerned with, like money, making money. But if you think about it, beauty is almost an indicator of prosperity and success. Any area that's incredibly wealthy is also very beautiful. It's almost like beauty follows wealth, or maybe wealth follows beauty. One inspires the other. I think the two are absolutely connected. And I'm all about a free market. I'm all about capitalism. I live in Utah. I'm making money on this video right now with advertising, but it can't be making a buck by any means possible. It's almost like if you've been to Mexico, to the beach, and you're laying there, you're trying to relax, and then these beach vendors just come and start harassing you over and over. They're trying to sell you these bandanas that are covered in profanity, hilarious, but inappropriate, knockoff sunglasses. It's a much better experience, and I would think leads to better economic outcomes if you don't allow quick cash at all costs.
It's a mystery to me, because they should be concerned with economic development, and beauty is so unbelievably crucial to economic development. It just yells out at you, you know. It's really hard to make something beautiful, and it's really worthwhile. And what's really cool is if you learn to make something beautiful, even one thing, if you could just make one thing in your life beautiful, then you've established a relationship with beauty, and then you can start to expand that relationship with beauty out into the world, like into other elements of your life, and that is so worthwhile. It's just incredibly, crazily worthwhile. And that's an invitation to the divine. You know, you have to be daring to do that. And people are terrified of it. People are terrified of color. They paint their walls beige. They're terrified of art. They buy some mass-produced thing because they don't want anybody laughing at them for their lack of taste. And they would get laughed at because they have no taste. But it's you're stumbling towards you're stumbling towards the kingdom of God. That's what you're stumbling towards when you try to make an aesthetic decision and to put something in your life that's beautiful, and it's unbelievably worthwhile to do that.
Billboards are going away, without a question. As we move into the future, you look at the Apple Vision Pro, that's only going to get better. Pretty soon, we're all going to be wearing glasses that have all the UI there, the augmented reality, and all the advertising is going to be in there. It's all going to be digital. It's all going to be online. The tech companies are going to dominate that space. If you think a company like Reagan Outdoor Advertising is going to compete, then I'm sorry, but you're crazy. So if you want to get involved, I'll link to Scenic America and Scenic Utah in the description. You can donate or volunteer. You can also contact your representative. They are easier to reach than you might think. Their phone numbers are posted, so look them up, give them a call. I appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.